So, good morning, and I wanted to kind of review what we talked about in class with the idea of typeface design, and also kind of go over like how I would approach it step by step in a video. Remember, we talked about like where do you start, and just going online and getting inspired by finding fonts that you find interesting and seeing what those fonts were. And then go on to the idea of taking a pencil and paper and just start fiddling with like shapes and forms, spell out your name in different ways. Try to get as creative as possible. Think about which size or which type of font you're going to be using. We said, if you're going to be doing an uppercase or a lowercase font, you should pick that ahead of time. And since we're only going to do one font, either uppercase or lowercase for this project, you'd only need to do one. Focus on the shape. Again, the pencil is the easiest thing to do to get your ideas out on into the world. If you go right into Illustrator, it might be a little bit difficult, although it's not impossible if you come up with a concept, and I'll show you that a little bit later. If it's a lowercase font, focus on the N and the O, or the N and the A, as we saw in class. The idea is if you can get the letter N and the letter O or the letter A ahead of time, then you're able to actually use those to create the letters C and the letters M and W and a lot of the other letters that kind of fall into that area. In fact, here's me focusing on the letter N and then seeing what letters happen to coincide with the letter N and the O, because the P and the A and the B are all kind of like the letter O except with a stem, those kinds of things. Then the next thing you're going to do after you're pretty solid, you've got an idea for a font, is you're going to move to Illustrator. And I'll show you that in a second. But this is me playing with some of the basic shapes that I'm going to be using over and over again for the font. In Illustrator, it's really good to like either grid things in a locked layer or modularize them so that each font kind of feels like it's the same, takes up the same amount of space on the paper or negative space, and this is always nice. Now, sometimes you're going to have ascenders and descenders, and it's good to start with your X height line, which I'll show you, and then as you get descenders and ascenders, visually start with one and then make that line in a locked layer so that all the other fonts can use those as to establish their top and bottom maximum height. Think about the weight of the thickness of your characters. Remember, super thin characters will not scale well. So some things that you're doing might look really good when you've blown it up, but when you try to make it small, as a font is, sometimes it won't work. So make sure that when you see things from far away, they look pretty good. And then finally, after you've got a bunch of shapes, as you can see on my left hand panel there, you're gonna just go through and make one letter at a time. Just get through it. And you can kind of see what I did here is just made the X height in blue, and I just started taking the letter N. Okay, got the letter Q. The letter Q is a lot like the letter D, only flipped upside down. And you just kind of get through it and put it into a separate artboard until you have all the letters. And then you're going to go ahead and assemble the alphabet, see how it looks, see if you like any or dislike anything that you've made. But the idea is like make sure it's all written out, that you haven't skipped a letter accidentally, and that every font is like a solid font. There's no weirdness about missing anything, or some of the fonts just don't work. In this case right here, you can kind of see my letter F is completely terrible, and if I had to, I would make it again. But putting them out on a line also shows you how they sit. You can see I have almost a ton of ascenders and very few descenders on this font, at least from the point of view of the letters shown here. Then in order for you to finish this brief, I would love you guys to put up a pangram of one of the pangrams, and you can see here a couple, but you can always look on the internet for Pangram Maker, and it'll allow you to make your own pangram. And remember, a pangram is a sentence that contains every single letter of the alphabet. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog is like one of the most popular. So go ahead and put out that pangram, and that'll allow people to see how your font is used as well. And then you're just going to go to Behance and post your font. Now, I'm going to go into Illustrator here and give you an example of, and I'm going to show you that font that I just made, the Crescent Font there. And you can kind of see when I select everything is still very open and loose. I haven't, dialed down any of the things. I've kept everything open. And I started by just creating this basic shape right here, as you can see, with an oval and then another oval, and then modifying some of the elements. You can kind of see how I made it here, and then using these pieces to construct the font. So you can kind of see I made this piece right here, and then I used it, and I'm like, okay, that's the letter N, and you can kind of see how I'm using the top line here to make sure that everything kind of is aligned correctly. And from the letter N, I then constructed the letter A by just moving this guy over and then twisting this to the side. The letter E is like the letter A, except for this piece being in the middle. The letter D is like the letter A, only with this element being much taller. Obviously Q. The letter F I had some issues with. As you can kind of see, this is not my favorite thing, and I'm trying to think, okay, what could I do? Maybe I could do something where I do something like the letter A. Just going to option drag this, move this over, flip it, and you can have the little flip tool here. And then you guys know how to use this stuff. And maybe I do something like this, and then duplicate it, and then do the same thing I did with the letter E. Does that work? No. It's not. It's terrible. So like what? So I'm just like stuck with the letter F. Maybe just getting rid of this part completely and just being happy with something like this. I don't know. That's probably better. You see what I'm saying? Now, will that work with the font? I don't know, because when you put this into the entire font, you can kind of see over here. Does that look better? So what I did eventually is come up with this as my choice, because I still needed a heavy weight. You can kind of see when everything is listed out, the only letter that's got a really thinness about it is letter I and T. And yeah, maybe it could have worked with this just flipped upside down. So look at the fonts that you feel successful about, and then write them out. Now, the reason I finally created, now remember, you can't use just this as your final font unless you're just doing a photograph, because what you need to do is you need to turn this into a solid block shape. Otherwise it won't work. You can kind of see that these are two shapes, right? And so in order to do that, you can use your Pathfinder, right? And you can just hit this this button right here, and what happens is you can see it just solidifies everything that's overlapping, right? You can do that, or you can go ahead and use the shape builder and just shape build if you need to. That'll allow you to like either get rid of like really little things or big things. Just make sure you don't miss anything with the shape builder. This is really important, because if you've got a double overlap, like I'm going to undo that, you might have missed this. Do you see that? Like I'm going to just take this away from me for the shape. But you see these two things right here? This is going to mess up your font. It really needs to be a solid font. So to be really sure, just use the Pathfinder tool, and you'll see that when you do that, everything goes away and it becomes one solid block path, unless you've done something weird or wrong. And then the idea is just to check. What I usually do is just take this entire object and flip the stroke with the outline around. So for instance, let me just show you that. Just flip it, and then you can tell if this is a solid outline, you're great, and if you've got some problems, then you should fix them. Once you've got all the solid outlines, you can kind of see here, you can move on to the next video where I actually have these turned into actual fonts. In other words, you're going to like get rid of every single, first you'll have to get rid of all these lines and stuff like that you'll see underneath. And this is what you're going to export, obviously with the inverted like element here where it's just like this. This is what you will export, and these are all perfectly created fonts, ready for turning into an actual true type font. And so that'll be the second part of the video. that you'll watch. So hopefully this helps. And then finally, what I'd like you to do is make sure that you use those letters up there and write out the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And obviously I used my own, I made a decision about the leading between the letters, right? And they're fairly close. Like if the letter D were to, if I were to take this letter D and move it over, you could kind of see it would overlap the P. So that's really a tight leading. In fact, there's zero leading. It's like a negative leading. But that's okay because I wanted it to be tight like this for the demonstration. And remember, each of these fonts is hand kerned anyway, so this is just what I thought would look okay. But you could make the leading a little bit more on yours depending on what you're doing. So that's about 10 minutes overview of how I went about making this font, and all you would have to do is post the example font like this, take a photo of this, or export it as a JPEG, and then take a photo of this, export it as a JPEG, and then show some examples of how you worked on it in Illustrator and some of your sketches, and then title the font. If you want to move forward and actually make this a working font, watch the next video, and that'll kind of go over that. Okay, for this the second part of the video, you can stop now if you wanted to, but I kind of wanted to go over like how would I approach making a font physically, and so you could see me like struggling with each letter. So what I was going to do was going to go, and this is my artboard that I started with on a new font, and I decided that this font would be constructed mostly of basic shapes, perfect triangle, perfect square, perfect circle, all 1 inch exactly in diameter, height, and width. And then half the size, so 50%, 50%, 50%, and then finally on a rectangle that's 50% as well. So it's the same square, but only 50% of the height and width type of thing. So these are the shapes that I want to work with in order to make this font. And so I wanted to kind of go through and just kind of show you how I approach it, starting with the letter. I thought this would be a great letter for the letter A. Now this is based off of a bunch of sketches that I had where I wanted to do something with the basic shapes. I thought this would make a great A, this can make a great O, this can make a great I. So a lot of the letters are already kind of done, and let's see how I would approach it. And you can kind of see here's a set of 2 circles and the letter I. And then once they overlap, you see I've got the B, and you can see I've got my P here, right? And so I'm pretty happy with that. Here was me exploring a different type of B. Here's me playing with shapes. You can see the letter D is just a combination of the letter O, or the circle, with the single outline. So the letter D is done. I can imagine turning this on the side, right, to make the letter U. Right, boom. All I have to do is figure out how I want to, to open this up. Do I want to take a circle and just, put it there? Oop. Let's see. CP. So I want to take a circle, just put it like this. And what I'm doing here is making sure that everything is kind of lined up using my my properties palette, so that everything like this is like perfectly aligned, because I kind of like the idea of everything being geometrically sound. So for this letter U, maybe what I could do is just, as you can kind of see here, just do something like that. And this gives me the outline for the U, for instance. Once I'm happy with this shape, right, I could use my path builder in this case, and this just kind of go through, and since everything is pretty clean, and then take away this stuff. And you can kind of see, don't want sloppy stuff at all until I've got a really nice solid path here, and then that becomes the letter U, obviously, as long as I give it a little bit of fill that's black. And that's like one more letter that's down. So P, B, G, and that's what I'm going to go through right now. So I'll put this into like fast motion so that you guys can see it, or I will stop this video and then I will make an additional video where I just kind of have it sped up so that you can kind of see what I do. And then what my hope is to come over here, and you can kind of see I've created a board that has the X height already locked. You can kind of see I can't touch that because of layer 2 here being locked. And what I will do is just start to assemble the letters as I get through them, and I'll make sure that I just remove the letters once I'm satisfied, so that I'll have all of them. I also, just for fun, put the letters, this is Futura, bold, and what I did is I just put the letters in this order so that I know that, hey, when I get a letter D, just like you saw, I can also do the letter U and the letter R and the letter P and the letter B, because they all kind of share that same vertical and then a curve in the front. And as it works, the letter C, G, O, and Q, based on this type of like Q, not something with a descender. Now, once I do get some descenders, I will put those in, and if I have any ascenders, like the letter I might have a dot, I will put that line in, and then I'll use that for all the other ones as well. So once I create one ascender, I'll put it in for the rest, and we'll see what happens. But I'm going to use that as a guide, but I haven't made anything yet, so I have no guide to start with other than the X height. I know it's going to be exactly 1 inch, which is what that square is. All right, hope this helps and it gives you a place to start.